Hey, this is Matt Larkin, and it's time for another episode of the Adventures in Advising podcast. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. We have a guest host today for episode 119. This guest was interviewed back in February of 2024 for episode 93, which was guest hosted by Dr. Loxley Nibbs. This guest host is going to interview someone that he knows, and we're really excited for this particular topic discussion. So let's welcome back. And by the way, he has the best name in the world because his name is also Matt, and that's Matt Plescia from Utah State University. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Matt. Thank you for the warm welcome. So I'm really happy to be back on the podcast. And today we're going to be interviewing Dr. Peter Howe. So Peter is the Associate Dean for Academics in the SJ and Jesse E. Quinney College of Natural Resources, and is a professor of geography in the Department of Environment and Society. He is a human environment geographer and environmental social scientist who focuses on public perceptions of climate change and environmental risks. His work uses tools like large-scale social surveys, geospatial analysis, statistical modeling, and geovisualization, which is all pretty fascinating stuff. And there's a lot of large words there, so if I stumbled over things, I apologize. Dr. Howe has earned some impressive honors, including the National Science Foundation Career Award in 2018. He's part of the Leadership for Climate Adaptation Science NSF National Research Traineeship Program at USU. And before joining at USU, he was a postdoctoral researcher at the Yale program on climate change communications, where he developed the Climate Opinions Map project. And Dr. Howe's also earned both his PhD and MS in geography from Penn State University. So with that, today, Peter, just like to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And so the first question is, typically on Adventures in Advising podcast, I know Matt would start with, what is your journey? So you've had a fascinating career in higher ed. So from Yale to USU, how did this all come together for you? And like what totally ultimately led you into this field?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I have a background in the discipline of geography. And I like to start by telling people a little bit about what geography is, because at least here in the US, sometimes people are a little surprised that that's something you can study at a university level. So geography is, it's a discipline, actually. It's been around for thousands of years. It's a major here at Utah State University and at many other schools. And it's essentially the study of space and place and the interactions between humans and our environment. So how people affect the environment and how the environment affects people. And especially these days, it's also got a really cool technological component. So geography includes the discipline of GIS, or Geographic Information Systems and Science, which is all about making maps and collecting spatial data using drones and remote sensing and satellite imagery. Some really important skills that our students are increasingly needing across a lot of majors. So I got into geography originally because I was interested in maps, and I was also interested in the environment. And I ended up majoring in geography when I was in college at Arizona State University. I discovered the major when I was in college there. I didn't initially realize it existed, but kind of fell in love with it in my junior year and switched my major, and had some great experiences with my professors. I ended up doing some undergraduate research and kind of switched my career path at that point too. I wanted to go to law school originally, but then discovered how much I loved doing research and was convinced to apply to graduate school by some of my professors. So I did that, and I ended up going to Penn State University, where I got a master's and a PhD, and I discovered my passion for working on climate as well. So ever since graduate school, I've done work at the interface of social science and climate change, while also including technology and models and statistics and social science data. So that's kind of the work that has led me to where I am today as a professor who does research as well as teaching, and now also as an administrator here at Utah State University.
Yeah, thank you for sharing more about your background. And so you've had a unique path. So here in USU, I started as an advisor, and now I'm in this advising coordinator role, and I've been an advisor here for about 2 years. And you've been in your associate dean role for about 2 years as well. So it's a fairly new position here within the Quinney College of Natural Resources. So you being a faculty advisor and overseeing advising as the associate dean now, how did your experiences as a faculty advisor shape the way that you've approached this new role here?
Yeah, so I've been a professor here at Utah State for almost 12 years now. And I started out teaching geography and GIS and serving as the faculty advisor for our geography major. By the way, I think it's we'll probably talk about this later, but something that is really cool about our college here at Utah State is that all of our majors have faculty who are assigned as faculty advisors in addition to professional advisors like yourself. So students can have those kind of direct relationships with faculty to learn more about their discipline as well as getting professional advising. So I really have appreciated that role. It's helped me meet all of our majors. We have a relatively small geography major, typically about 20 to 30 students in that major, among the 500 or so students in our College of Natural Resources, as well as now a rapidly growing certificate program in GIS, Geographic Information Science, with almost 60 students in there now from other majors. But yeah, it's been great to get to know students through that role as well as my teaching. I teach introductory GIS, which is a required class of all the majors in the Quinney College of Natural Resources. We now have 10 different majors, and it's required in all of them, as well as several other majors around campus. And that's given me the opportunity to really get to know students from a wide range of backgrounds with a wide range of interests, especially related to natural resources. But we have majors, for example, our largest major focuses on wildlife science. It's called Wildlife Ecology and Management. These are students who are passionate about studying wildlife. They want to work with wildlife. Maybe they want to go on and be a wildlife veterinarian or a park ranger or a federal land manager in some ways. To other majors like forest ecology and management, folks who want to go and be foresters, or fisheries and aquatic sciences, people who want to work with wetlands and aquatic ecosystems, or environmental studies, folks who want to maybe influence environmental policy or work as a sustainability officer. So we have a wide range of students, and one of the unifying factors is that they all need to learn how to use geospatial data and work with maps, because that's a common skill across all those environment and natural resources fields. So I've gotten to know our students that way, and that led me to be interested in this role as an associate dean, where I get to oversee our undergraduate programs and help improve our curriculum and do things like award scholarships and oversee our fantastic advising center. And so it's been really rewarding in that role to help have a role in really contributing to the success of our students in the college.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so, yeah, this is not a typical role for me because, my past two institutes, I was in a much larger college, and so I would be reporting to a director, and I have about 12 other advisors with me, and now it's myself and Wake here within QCNR. So that's another question I wanted to ask you is how do you manage the academic advising center to ensure students feel supported and connected? I mean, we are such a small college, as you mentioned, 500 students. So what are some tips you could give to maybe some other associate deans that are managing advisors, maybe in a smaller institute, like on this size level?
Yeah. So at Utah State, we have a fairly decentralized advising model where we do have advisors within every college. And here in QCNR, we have two advisors, one of which is you. And those two advisors are assigned to our 500 students. And I think that is a great. I mean, it's enabled us to have one-on-one meetings with all of our students every semester if they choose, and I think students really feel connected to the college as a result. They feel supported by the college. So I really value that. In addition to the great peer advisors and other student employees we have, like ambassadors who oversee recruitment. I think having this decentralized model where we have advisors within the colleges really helps students to connect with that academic unit, which can be a challenge, I think, in some institutions. And really see themselves as a student in natural resources, in addition to being a student at Utah State University. And Utah State is a big school. We've got almost 30,000 students here in Logan, and it can be a little bit, you can feel kind of anonymous, I think, as a result. And so that's one of the things that I really like about here in natural resources is we're able to create a community for those students. And help them feel valued, and the advising center is a real key part of that. And there's some other things that we're able to do too. You know, the physical space is really important. You know, we have a couple great facilities here centered on the Natural Resources Building in Logan, which is kind of got a ski lodge feel. It was built in the 80s. It's got a lot of exposed wood and concrete, and it's got a beautiful central atrium where students love to hang out and study, and with a little a stream fountain in it, and some wildlife displays. And our advising offices are right off the atrium, so students see the advising office when they're here in the building when they're studying, and I think that presence really helps as well. That sort of physical exposure to the office, so it encourages them to maybe get over that hurdle, make that appointment if they see you, Matthew, and Wake around, as well as our peer advisors.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, mentioned this too, just having you be so accessible as a resource as well for our students. You actually tend to join our orientations. And one of our classes, as you mentioned, that you teach is Intro to GIS, and all of our majors in natural resources have to take that course. And you happen to do an activity with those students during that. Can you walk us through that activity that you do during those orientation sessions with those students?
Yeah, doing the orientations is something I love. It's great to meet our students right as they are entering our program. And as you mentioned, I talk about how they're all going to be required to take our Intro GIS course, since it's required of all of our majors. And I try to introduce what we talk about in GIS through this activity where I hand out these national park map brochures. You know, if you've ever been to a national park, you know, at the entrance station, they give you a brochure which has they're all kind of formatted the same way. They've got a really nice looking map there of the national park. People love to collect these things too. But I kind of hand these out randomly, these maps of parks from all over the country. And I ask students to just take a few minutes to study that map and think about why the map is as it is. Why is it designed this way? What does it contain? What are all the decisions that go into making a map? And think about, you know, for example, what does the map emphasize? For national park maps, it typically emphasizes things that visitors are going to want to see. And what does it de-emphasize, or what does it not include? So oftentimes students will realize that, say, if they're looking at a map of Yellowstone National Park, the map doesn't have any information about where the wolves of Yellowstone are, or where the bison are, which are two really important features of the ecosystem of Yellowstone, and things that visitors want to see. But there are reasons why that information is not in the map, for protecting that ecosystem and trying to guide visitors to the right places. So it gets them thinking about, you know, how do we communicate using maps? That's a really important form of communication. How do we make these kinds of decisions? You know, these are decisions managers in natural resources are making all the time about how to guide visitors in our public lands, for example, something that a lot of our graduates will end up doing as in a work environment. And I think it's a nice way of connecting at least this idea of GIS and mapping to environment and natural resources, which is maybe not such an obvious connection for students all the time.
And having you there is so instrumental. This really helps. Something I'm very passionate about is the appreciative advising framework, and this is something that you've let me do professional developments with, and I really appreciate that. So it's kind of helping disarm students right off the bat when they're coming to us at QC&R. They're getting to meet you, the associate dean, which is not typical for a lot of institutes, and really they just know that they are seen and that they have someone to go to, as well as myself and Wake. And then another thing I wanted to ask you was, so we wear many hats in higher education. So you are juggling a lot of responsibilities as administrator, a professor, and both a researcher. So just for other administrators that might be in a similar role, how are you balancing these responsibilities? And do you have any other tips for how you are balancing these?
Yeah, great question. It's so as an administrator, as associate dean, that is technically 50% of my job now, and then I'm also still teaching our intro GIS class, and then working on research. I have some ongoing grants, and doing kind of the typical service responsibilities that faculty do in most universities, serving on committees and such. And having been in this role as an administrator now for 2 years, now I kind of finally feel like I have an idea of what the job fully entails. It's taken a lot of time. There's a lot of different things to manage and processes to learn and deadlines to figure out. But I feel like I have a handle on it now. But of course, there's always new challenges that come down the line too. So here at Utah State University and other Utah State institutions right now we are working on things like exploring changes to our curriculum around things like general education requirements, and exploring alternative degree options, and creating things like new certificates. All these things related to curriculum are an important part of my job, and something that I've had to learn. That's not something that most faculty end up doing as part of their teaching role. So that's been interesting, and an interesting challenge. And I'd say, it's one of the things that has I've really valued about this role is being able to connect my teaching to my administrative work. So as I mentioned, I teaching a required course has let me meet a lot of our students and learn about students' backgrounds and career interests in different majors in our college. And so that is that kind of allowed me to hit the ground running as an administrator, and make some changes and work on doing some things to contribute to student success across all of our majors in natural resources. So yeah, it's and there's always new challenges, like I mentioned too. So it's an exciting role, but I really value being in this position mainly because I'm able to give back to students. I'm able to help contribute to student success in a bit more of a tangible way than I could as a full-time faculty member with a primary research role.
Yeah, and there's always going to be moving parts in higher education, constant changes. And so another thing I wanted to get into was you just mentioned your research, and then you have some grants going on right now for them as well. Does your research, with perception of climate change and things of that nature, has that influenced any of the ways that you've interact or shaped any of your advising strategies when you're doing some of your faculty advising?
Yeah, so part of my research focuses on the human dimensions of climate change, and specifically things like public perceptions and communication around climate, as well as other connected natural hazards. I have a couple programs right now that are focused on understanding extreme heat as a hazard, for example, and how we can understand how people respond to heat. I'd say one of the strongest connections between my research work and my role in advising and student success is around communication. So, as a researcher, we know that there are some tried and true techniques to communicating, especially communicating hard things. When it comes to climate change and hazards, oftentimes we need to communicate that people are in situations where they're at risk, or that we need to try to change behavior or encourage people to do something, like buy hazard insurance, or even if it comes to it in a crisis, to evacuate or prepare to evacuate. And there's some, being in this field, I know that there are oftentimes some misconceptions that folks have if they don't know the research about communication that actually don't work, which maybe kind of be applied in an educational setting too. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that if you just give people information, that they will act on that information. This is kind of a classic mistake that scientists often make, where we assume that if we just tell people, for example, that something that they're doing is as putting them at risk, then they will change their behavior and stop doing that thing. Like if you tell people that smoking is bad, then they will stop smoking. Now we know that's not very effective from decades of research. Instead, things that work better are actually telling stories, trying to connect with people, and helping people understand information from trusted sources and in ways that matter to them and are meaningful to them. And so I think that's really what our advisors like you are doing with this appreciative advising framework, right? It's trying to connect with students, trying to learn their story and telling your own stories, and not just giving them a 4-year plan of courses, right? We know that students are not necessarily going to follow that plan just if you give it to them, right?
100%. And I like that you mentioned the supervising framework too as well, and I'm really happy that that's something that you value too. I think you could see it in their student feedback as well, which I'm really grateful that USU has that set up. And our feedback, our students are not just like, they are mentioning that we are listening to them, and we are hearing their stories, and like sometimes they're surprised that myself as an advisor will remember something that they've said to me 6 months ago. They'll be like, how did you remember that? And it's like, well, because I'm listening to you, I'm actively listening, and we want to hear your story and get you also graduated as well, and make sure that we're focusing on that student success aspect. And you had mentioned faculty advisors in the past. So faculty advisors bring a lot to the table here at USU, especially in natural resource disciplines, because they are the ones who are doing the work in that sense. So I'm not a career advisor. So in a sense, how do you foster that collaboration between both faculty advisors and myself as an advisor?
Yeah. So here in the College of Natural Resources, all of our majors have faculty advisors. Some of our larger majors have multiple faculty advisors who students are assigned to. And they are the connections for students who are interested in learning more about the discipline itself and about specific career opportunities, and maybe advice about the content of certain discipline-specific courses, or particularly graduate school and undergraduate research are two really important connections for students with faculty advisors. We are somewhat unique at Utah State University in having faculty advisors for all of our majors. I think part of that is because we are a small college. We have the resources to do that. And I think it's good to have these multiple points of contact for students with the institution, and a venue outside of courses where students can connect with faculty, because I think there's often a barrier, and students may be unwilling or afraid to make an appointment with a professor just kind of out of the blue. But the faculty advisor system provides a channel for them to do that, kind of an easy point of entry for them to connect with a professor who can then make those connections to other faculty and say, like, if we know of colleagues who are hiring undergraduate researchers who are doing projects that might be related to a student's interests, then we can make those connections. I would also add that undergraduate research itself is something that we really value here in the College of Natural Resources and at Utah State University. We are only the second institution in the country to create an undergraduate research program after MIT, which is something that we are really proud of, and we have various ways that we financially support undergraduate researchers at the university level, as well as here in the College of Natural Resources. And we are I think something like 40% or more of our students end up doing undergraduate research during their time here, which is great. And it's the undergraduate research that we do is often, in cool places and dealing with cool topics. And I think it helps students get and remain engaged, and really often ends up leading them to careers in natural resources or graduate programs.
Yeah, and that's part of my job as an advisor here. QCNR is helping students bridge that gap too, to also connect with those faculty advisors, because sometimes they are they'll be more apt to come to myself as an advisor, and they might be a little scared to meet with a faculty member, and we just kind of have to let them know, like, hey, these faculty members are here to see you succeed. And this is kind of going back to like when we were talking about orientation. During our orientations, you and I kind of like will play back and forth. I'm like, I'll mention like, hey, Peter is probably going to be one of your professors here, Dr. Howe, I would say to them. And office hours are huge. And one of the things I will note is not enough students are utilizing them. And something that you'll chime in with is that you are wanting to meet with these students. And it's such an instrumental role in having them succeed. And another thing I wanted to talk about was faculty development as well. So this is something that you and I have discussed, and I value you as a thought partner. So the Appreciative Advising Institute, we've mentioned multiple times, but you are going to allow Wake and I to give a presentation to our faculty advisors. So what kind of faculty development do you have planned for them to help excel in their roles? And what is your kind of vision for this as well for us going forward?
Yeah, and so that's a new initiative that we're working on, because I know as a faculty advisor, we don't really have any training in this role, and actually as professors, it may surprise a lot of students to know that most professors don't get any training in teaching either as part of in graduate school. So we are kind of picking things up on the fly, and taking examples from our own professors. Now that is something that's changing, fortunately. So a lot of graduate programs now are including experiences in teaching and curriculum in teaching. But there are many professors who didn't have that any of that formal training in teaching, let alone advising, which is its own whole set of skills, and something that through we're starting out with a workshop for our faculty here in natural resources and our faculty advisors, and I'd love to continue providing some of these resources for them to learn best practices around advising and some skills for connecting with our students. We have some. I think the more we can do to support student success, the better, of course. We are, as a university and as a college, we're trying to retain students and grow our enrollments as much as possible. And I think the more connections and the more meaningful relationships that students have with people at the institution, that can help them retain and graduate, and then maintain those connections afterwards as well. So having some of these kinds of trainings is an important part of it, and also recognizing the importance of the role of the faculty advisor in, for example, by the institution as an important role that's similar to teaching, that can contribute to overall student success and and also the metrics that, of course, the institution cares about, like retention.
Yes, and that's another thing too. I value, what administration sometimes doesn't know what we do as advisors. Faculty members sometimes don't know what we do as advisors. So you allowing us to, implement these workshops for our faculty members, I think will be very instrumental in, moving forward their practices as well. So another thing I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the biggest challenges in QCNR, and how are you working to overcome them? And not just you, but ourselves as a college as well.
Yeah, we are, like I mentioned, we are the smallest academic college at Utah State University, with about 500 students. So that comes with a ton of advantages, like we've talked about, including a low student to faculty ratio, about 9-to-1, which means we tend to have small classes and allows students to have those more of those relationships with faculty and do things like undergrad research. But that also brings challenges. So as many institutions around the country are dealing with challenges related to the demographic cliff, as it's been called, we're seeing enrollment stagnating or decline in some places. That is not as much of a phenomenon in Utah, which is it still has a rapidly growing population and a lot of high school graduates, but it's something that we're going to be dealing with as well at some point. So we have these larger sort of national level trends at the same time as being a state institution, we are responsive to the state policy environment and the state legislature. And they have set goals for us regarding growing our enrollments and growing our majors in areas that they see as high yield and high demand for the workforce. Now, in natural resources, we have some pretty unique programs, and many of our programs are critical for the workforce. For example, we end up graduating many of the people who go on to manage public lands in Utah, federal lands and state lands, who work for like the National Forest Service or the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. And these are roles that couldn't really be filled by another institution. And so we have some unique value, but at the same time, we also see that we need to be responsive to these overall changing trends and demographic trends, national trends, and try to grow enrollments where possible. So, for example, we are seeing student demand in the area of environmental science and sustainability, which is a new major that we've recently created here in the College of Natural Resources, and has already grown to about 20 students without much advertising. And in technologies and skills like GIS and remote sensing, we have been creating new programs and we're seeing growing enrollments. And we've received some state funding, for example, for a program in remote sensing and geospatial artificial intelligence, where we're seeing a lot of workforce demand. So we're responding to these challenges, and there's only those challenges are going to continue, but I really value our college at Utah State University and the university as a whole in being dynamic and nimble at responding to these challenges. I think we have a good college culture and leadership, and we're able to make changes and implement things like new curricula fairly quickly, which has allowed us to be so responsive.
Yes, and I think our students see that as well. And then just like, we are such a tight-knit community. So kind of like tailing off of that question as well, where do you think QCNR, what do you think it will look like in 5 years from now? So the way that we should be evolving to meet students' changing needs.
Yeah, great question. So I think we have about 500 students now. I'd love to see us have 550 or 600 students in 5 years. We'll see if we can get there. but I think one area that I'd love to see us be responsive to is the changing demographics and backgrounds and interests of our students. So we're seeing more students who are coming into our college who don't necessarily have some of the outdoors and field skills that our students may have had in the past. Many of our students still grow up in rural areas, but we have more and more coming from urban areas who haven't worked on a ranch or don't know how to drive a stick shift, or a lot of these specific skills, which if they're going to work in a land management position or work out in the field, they might need to know. So on the one hand, we're trying to provide some of those skills opportunities and ease students into some of these outdoor situations and field positions. We have a fantastic student-run camp every fall, which we've been running for the past few years now, that the college supports, that gives students some exposure to these field skills and gets them out up the canyon here outside of Logan. So that's one way. And the other way is also that we're acknowledging and responding to the fact that not every natural resources major is someone who wants to spend their whole career outside. And so we have some important majors, like, for example, geography and GIS, or environmental science and policy, environmental studies, for folks who want to contribute. They're interested in giving back. They want a position that is in the environmental field. And maybe they will end up working as a sustainability officer for a corporation or for a city government or something like that. And so we're providing those opportunities as well. And I think one of our challenges is in reaching students who maybe are interested in some of those less traditional natural resources positions and majors, and helping them realize that we are a place where they can have get the skills and get the degree for those kinds of careers as well.
Yeah, and that was something when I stepped into this role for natural resources. I was a social science advisor, so I was psychology, criminal justice, legal studies, majors surrounding that area. So when I stepped into this role in NR, I really didn't know much about what our students were doing, and we also have like federal resumes, for instance, that students are having to fill out. I had only known about a traditional resume, so this was all stuff that how you mentioned, we're constantly learning. So that's something I also had to constantly learn too. And when our students are coming here right away, one of the first questions I'll ask them in the appointment is, do you know the difference between a traditional and federal resume? If they say no, all of our students are required to take NR 2000, so our Natural Resource Professional Orientation course, and that's where they'll get all of that information. But they're going to get it from someone that's more well-versed in a federal resume than I am myself. But that's why we also have two great peer advisors as well. So I did want to touch on our peer advisors. They do a ton of great work. We would not be able to function as a unit without them, I believe. And I think USU is really building up their peer advisory program as well. So do you see that growing in the next 5 years? Just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I really value those peer advisor positions, and I think they're a critical part of the whole advising system in the college. They give students a face and a peer that they can ask these questions of, and who maybe will ultimately direct them to one of our professional advisors like you for more specific advice. But it helps to provide another connection to the institution that has a kind of a lower barrier to students relating to. And we have some specific needs that they fill too, like you mentioned, with providing advice on federal resumes. We have over 20% of our graduates end up working in federal positions, and applying to federal jobs is kind of a whole separate ballgame. It's not only do you need a different resume, but the whole job search system and application system is very, very different from the private sector or from other like the nonprofit or state and municipal government even. And so having peer advisors who are familiar with that system, who have many of them have done a federal internship, is really critical to the success of our graduates. So that is something that we totally value. And then they also provide some other hands-on support for events and other programs in the college. We have things like a career fair where we have many of those federal and state and other employers who come in every year and meet our students. We have one of our real college highlights is our internship program, where we connect students to and actually partially fund internships with federal agencies like the Forest Service, state agencies like the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and nonprofits, and place students in these positions for summer paid internships. They're well paid. They're full-time in the summer, and they give students a window into what working in one of these natural resources positions is like. And so peer advisors have been critical in helping support that program. I was, as I transitioned into this role as associate dean, we had a peer advisor who essentially ran that entire program, which we're really grateful for. And so, yeah, they are absolutely critical to the success of our college, as you mentioned.
The work they do is amazing, and they inspire me as well. And I know they inspire our students. And also, I know when you walk by our office sometimes, like, sure, you hear students will just come in to just chat with them and just have conversations, not even just make an appointment with them, and they know they can do that. And both of our peer advisors now are amazing, and they're more than willing to do that. And I know that we don't have that much time left for the podcast today, but I did want to mention one other critical area that you've kind of implemented since I've been here. So the peer ambassador program. I just want to know, so these peer ambassadors come with me when I go to recruiting events, and they also go to recruiting events on their own. What made you start that peer ambassador program? And it truly is thriving. So I just wanted to, get your take, how that came to be.
Yeah, so our peer ambassador program, we started a couple of years ago, and it's the way that we structure it here in natural resources at USU is we hire students to be ambassadors for a year-long position. They're paid a stipend, and they're expected to work a certain number of hours helping out with mainly recruitment kind of events. And we try to find students who kind of represent the breadth of the college in terms of their majors and their interests. And these are students who are really engaged, and it's just been a real pleasure working with them. Where the roles that we have them play are things including tabling, like you mentioned. So we have a lot of events on campus and off campus where we send our ambassadors to connect with prospective students or students who have applied and have not yet decided to come to Utah State, to really put a face on the institution and help them learn about what being a student in natural resources is like. And we're using them as well. We're having them connect with students in high schools. We have, for example, presentations at AP Biology or AP Environmental Science classes around Utah and our concurrent enrollment courses that the college offers. So they're able to go talk about their experiences with high school students, which is, I think, maybe high school students are maybe more likely to listen to a current student than someone who's been in a professor role for a decade. So it's absolutely critical to have those kinds of positions, and they're really supporting our recruitment efforts, which is important for our goals as a college, because as I mentioned, we're trying to grow our enrollments, and one of the ways we're doing that is really expanding awareness of what our programs are, because we have kind of an interesting geography here in Utah, going back to that term, where here Utah State University is located about an hour and a half away from the largest metro area in the state, the Wasatch Front, where most of Utah's population lives. And we have found, and actually I grew up in that part of Utah, and didn't know a whole lot about Utah State University, let alone the College of Natural Resources. And so what we're trying to do is expand awareness of our programs and of our college through these kinds of recruitment activities, and we're finding success, both in-state as well as increasingly more out-of-state students.
And I had mentioned this on the past episode that I was on the podcast. So recruiting wasn't a big part of my previous roles as an advisor. But for advisors that, it is, having this peer ambassador program that you've initiated truly has helped our recruitment. And it's, like you mentioned, they might come up to me as an advisor and like have that barrier, but then having those students there who have actually done internships, who have done, some of the courses that I'll be, explaining to them. So, I can go through, courses that they're going to be taking, but if a student is actually going to be sharing, what, they did in the field in that class, that really opens students' eyes. And then also just them, most of the time will have pictures on their phone of their experiences as well. I know one of our peer ambassadors has, worked with SEALs in Washington, and then, he shares those pictures, and it just really, helps have those students come to QCNR. And,
totally. And we have such charismatic experiences that students can get involved in, right? Like our Wildlife Society Club every year goes up to Yellowstone National Park in the spring before you can even go in as a tourist, to see bears coming out of hibernation, and works with their faculty advisor, Dr. Dan McNulty, who is one of the world experts on the Yellowstone ecosystem and Yellowstone's wolves. We have fantastic experiences like that, as well as study abroad programs, which students really often connect with. Like we have a program that takes students to the Great Barrier Reef, to a research station where they live on an island off the coast of Australia and snorkel and scuba dive, collecting data, learning about marine biology every day for 2 weeks. These are just fantastic experiences that really, I think, help prospective students understand what being a natural resources student, what kind of opportunities that can entail.
Yeah, and I would say the thing I want to close out with is just finally, how you've shaped and how you've led advising has really, implemented myself as an advisor, and I do want to thank you for that. You have generously let me go to 2 NACADAs, one which I was able to present at and grow as an advisor, and all of these tools that we have for our students makes my job that much easier as an advisor as well, because they really do want to come in, meet with me, and go over all these great resources that we have. And not every institute has that, and it's something that I've been grateful for. So Peter, I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with us. It's inspiring to hear your vision for advising and how you're both supporting, our advisors and both, more importantly, our students as well. And to our listeners, thanks you for tuning into the Adventures in Advising podcast. Until next time, keep exploring new ways to make a difference in advising.